So we were having a brief discussion before you joined, Ty, about Kids in the Hall. Are you a
Okay.
Kids in the Hall fan at all?
I know of some of the actors. I don't really.
Yeah,
A little bit before me, I think.
yeah. That's funny.
I
The Kids in the Hall would be before you. Sorry, like it's
I
not one
love.
thing
I
for Monty
remember the
Python.
movie.
Again, Ty.
Yeah,
Innocently, you've made me feel old because
really.
like
I mean, it's one thing for Monty Python to be before someone. I get that.
right. It's like with me like if to me for me like it was like SCTV, Saturday Night
Right.
Live,
Yes.
and Monty Python. You
And
know,
then Kids in the Hall. Like Kids in the Hall came after all of that stuff.
right? It was in the '90s, wasn't
Oh
it?
yeah, it's totally in the '90s. I was working at Borders Bookstore, watching Kids in the Hall, having Kids in the Hall marathons with my friends back then. That was my '90s. But
Yeah.
yeah, they were. I mean, they were really good. And you know the actors you have gone on. You know the actors like Dave Foley is, but he's probably the most famous of them. But
Mark McKinney and
yeah, there's something to watch on YouTube. Like just YouTube Kids in the Hall. Sometimes there are some really and YouTube Kids in the Hall Leafs game. That is a funny like hockey related Kids in the Hall episode that just will crack you up.
actually, if you go back to SCTV, I know that like John Candy did some skits where he was Harold Ballard, the owner of the Leafs, and they were, I mean,
Yeah.
believe me, Harold Ballard was born to be made fun of because he was just such a character.
Well,
Um,
SCTV is my favorite thing from SCTV of all time was the Battle of the PBS Stars, which is like something you had. Do you remember that? Like there was when we were kids. I mean, back in when the trees were growing.
back in the '70s.
No, there was a thing called Battle of the Network Stars, and Battle of the Network Stars is then they would take like the people like who were on the sitcoms and
Like,
pit them
like
against each other.
from Linda Carter from Wonder Woman and the Greg Evigan from BJ and the Bear and like
Yeah, they would pit them
Shatner.
against each other in like swimming events or like weird obstacle courses or strange. So
O.J. Simpson was in a few of them, but he wasn't carrying a knife.
Oh yeah, yeah. They were. I mean, they were really surreal. Like in the Battle of PBS Stars was like what SCTV did, which was like Mr. Rogers versus
Alistair Cook.
yeah, Mr. Rogers versus the cooking woman. I forget her name.
Julia Child.
Julia Childs in the boxing in a boxing match. Like that was like the Battle of the PBS Stars, but that was SCTV. So yeah, definitely Kids in the Hall. I actually know one of them is a fan of Hockey Buzz, so he might be watching now. But yeah, they were definitely worth a reboot. And now I think they're free on one of these apps that I bought recently.
Actually, like, it's funny because I met Dave Foley. Well,
Oh, yeah?
okay. It's like one of these things where you don't want to really like say hi to a guy
Yeah.
when you're waiting in line for the bathroom.
Yeah.
And Dave Foley was like two people ahead of me in the line for the men's room after a Leaf game, and I'm like, "Hey, Dave," like I didn't really want to go say hi, Dave Foley, as he's looking to empty his bladder. So I just said,
Oh yeah, yeah. No, he's a great guy. Dave Foley is actually a Hockey Buzz fan. But no, they are really good guys, and they're all very funny, and a lot of them going on to other things, but. It kind of goes back to my like era of like Kids in the Hall and Moxie Fruvis from Toronto. The bands they were like a band that you would have totally been into, Ty. They were like the I mean they were hip for that time, and Moxie Fruvis was pretty. I mean they played through Buffalo too a lot. I'm sure.
Aren't they a jam band? I mean, I don't know.
The Bare Naked Ladies got famous and Moxie Fruvis didn't, and they were like basically the same band. All right,
Okay.
but they were very entertaining. But they were more literal, like literary. They had really crazy references in their songs to literature and stuff like that. That was really good. Like Moxie Fruvis was a really intelligent group of guys.
Whereas Bare Naked Ladies are very goofy.
Yeah, they were goofy too. But like if you look up, there's like Baby Loves a Bunch of Authors and other songs by where Moxie Fruvis just went into a whole bunch of crazy things about books and things like that. They were fun. I toured with them for a while. Moxie Fruvis, they were cool. All right, so let's get on with the show. Here we go. It is the 15th of January.
That it is.
All right, let's do it.
Yes, it is.
It's a Friday too.
Friday the 15th. Let me get my notes up real quick here. The Friday the 15th. Excellent. Plenty to talk about today. We will start with rumors. Right off the top today. All right, here we go. All right. Hello, Hockey World. It is Friday, January 15th, 2015. 16.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Ty Anderson.
And I'm Eklund, and you're watching the HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com, and that doesn't count, Mike. That doesn't count. Or maybe it does. I've got to pay Mike every time I mess up this year or something. Something like that. You're watching Hockey Buzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday. Of course, since it's Friday, we have Ty with us today to talk about all the woes of the Bruins as of late.
Do we have to?
Yeah, we'll have to get into that at some point. But, you know, they're...
If Russ was on the show, he definitely would have to.
I've never seen someone gloat more in like another team's losses than Russ Cohen. It's actually unbelievable.
It is pretty unbelievable.
But the funny thing is it's the opposite with me. Russ will send me messages when the Leafs win because he knows that most Leaf fans want them to lose right now.
Yeah, he's an in real life Twitter troll. It's actually kind of remarkable.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
He means well though, Ty. He means well.
No, of course.
I mean, the Bruins have lost a couple games now when leading going into the third period, which means, of course, that they're terrible. I mean, it's amazing how much they were making a big deal of this the other night, on the Flyers Bruins broadcast. It was, like, incredible. Like, this is, like, it's okay that they've lost 2 games in a row. This is one of the stats that drives me crazy. Teams, they're 26-2-4 when leading and going into the third period or whatever. I just hate that stat because it really is ridiculous. Because the fact that if you're leading by 1 goal and the other team scores a goal, it is now tied. It's not like the end of the world. You could very easily not score the next goal and lose. I mean, it's one thing if you're leading by 2 or 3 goals going in the third period, but anyways, the Bruins have lost 2, and of course, none of that had to do with the Flyers the other night. The way they were talking, it was like, the Bruins are just terrible, and the Flyers, they just got lucky, but
Yeah, I mean, the Flyers came in with three wins in a row. They were playing better. You're getting contributions from guys like Simmons and a lot of those players that you've been hoping for. I think heading into that game, Couturier's line has been producing a lot of the scoring as of late for the Flyers, but you get Simmons on the board. I think Voracek's on the board, and the last goal was straight, I believe, but I believe that was with the top line out there.
It was from Giroux, so it was the same thing. I mean, and you're right, and it's a great line. I mean, it's a line I've always wanted them to put together. It's a line that Berube and Laviolette would never put together for some reason. Was Giroux, Voracek, and Simmons, because it just makes a ton of sense. Simmons, I mean, I know why they're not doing it because they're both Simmons and are both right wings and Voracek, but they've managed to move this around now, and I think Voracek's playing the left side or something like that. It makes sense because you got a guy in Simmons who's going to go in there and get the puck in the corners, and Voracek and Giroux are going to do their thing. So, they are starting to play pretty well together, and Braden Shen and Couturier on the second line have gotten a lot of chemistry going as well, along with Raffles. So Raffles is one of the more underrated players in the NHL too that people don't really talk about, but he's a nifty little player. Mike?
Ty, what I'm wondering is, and right now, the Bruins are in that wild card mix. They're in or they're out. Depending on who wins one day. If it stays like this, I mean, you've got Louis Eriksson as a UFA. You've got Krejci injured. I think it's still week to week, so we don't know specifically when he's going to come back. I mean, they're sort of in an unsettled position right now. I mean, what indications are you getting of what they're going to do, or are they going to basically wait till the 11th hour to make those decisions?
I think it's more likely that more than anything else, because I think that Louis Eriksson wants to be here. He wants to sign an extension. From everything I've gathered, he likes playing here. And the Bruins really don't have an in-house replacement for Louis Eriksson when he is a free agent. So I think signs should point to them re-signing him, because there's not a player you're going to get in the free agent market or in your own pipeline that can replace what he does for you. So I think that's an important thing for the Bruins to sort of realize there. And then I think they look at this similar to last year, where if they can get in, they think they can make noise, especially with a goaltender as good as Tuukka Rask, and they're limiting his games played so he's not playing 75 games again or whatever it was last season. Yeah. So they think if they keep Rask healthy and fresh, they can make noise in the playoffs.
It makes sense. Your cat obviously agrees too.
The cat agrees.
Yeah, the cat needs to shut the hell up. Oh my
God. now the thing is,
cats are harmed during today's podcast, by the way.
Yes, the thing is, looking at the Bruins objectively from the outside. I mean, I think I like the fact that they're getting contributions from guys like Spooner, and obviously they added Bolesky and Jimmy Hayes. They obviously need to get Krejci back for them to have any kind of chance in the playoffs or even to make the playoffs. But to me, it's defense where I think they need to add before the deadline. but they really don't have any room to add. I mean, they've already put Chris Kelly on long-term injury, so I don't think they have a lot of room to maneuver when it comes to acquiring a defenseman.
Yeah, I mean, if someone's coming in, someone's going out. That's the best way you can describe it. And you look at the roster, there's not a lot of guys that you would say the Bruins either want to trade or can trade. Because I think, a guy like Brett Connolly, who has 1 goal in his last 31 games, there's really no value there. And he's making, I think, less than $1 million right now, or like 1.1. So there's really not a lot of sense in moving him because it doesn't create that much room. And you almost look at it like, all right, let's just keep this guy. Jimmy Hayes, you're not moving him. Matt Bolesky, you're not moving him. Your younger defensemen, I mean, these guys are all making their entry-level deals. They're affordable. Yeah. You don't need to move them. I hate this cat. This cat's not mine. It's my roommate's, and it's driving me nuts.
It's not your cat. Well,
Yeah, and
you really can't hear it that much.
Steinberg, maybe that's a player that you want to move, but I don't know what his value is. So a lot of guys that the value's not there, or there's really no sense in moving them right now.
I've been impressed with Bolesky lately. I don't know why. Just watching Bolesky play, he just we knew last year everybody thought he was going to sign for too much money, and he ended up signing for reasonable amounts. It was a weird thing with Bolesky last year. Everybody was kind of downplaying him. Oh, he's going to get way too much money. He ended up getting him probably what he should have gotten, and he really has looked very good on Boston. I mean, when you look at him, he looks like he was a Bruin his whole life. Like for some reason, he just feels like he fits with the Bruins way better than he fit with the Ducks.
Yeah, and that's true. I've said this since day one, I think, of the signing, is that you're getting Matt Bolesky's all on every single shift, and you can't hate that. I think there's a price tag on that. You don't want to oversell grit and heart and things of that nature, but $3.8 million for a top-line left winger who will go into every corner and go to the front of the net on every shift, versus what you were paying last year, $6 million for Lucic to go every 10 games, you'd see the real Milan Lucic.
Right.
And that was maddening for a lot of Bruins fans. So you can't look at Bolesky and think this is a guy that's harming them this year, because he's playing his absolute tail off every shift, and I think he's been a great fit in Boston. This is a guy that really sort of, he fell in love with the old Bruins style of play, and he always viewed himself as a fit for that. So, I mean, this is a guy that I think he knows the history of the town, especially when it comes to the hockey team, and he's lived up to that.
It's been great. It's great. It's great to watch him play. I mean, I wanted to get into we're going to get into some rumors here because we have the Jonathan Drouin thing is ongoing. Now, I think this is going to be ongoing for a while still. I'm still not convinced that this is imminent. But yesterday there was a reporter on Twitter, Mike, what was said?
Renaud Lavoie from TVA, who was very, he normally is pretty.
No, he's good. He's very good. Yeah.
Very good, very tied in, and he reported that something might be resolved within 24 hours, and I think he mentioned 3 teams. The leading contender obviously has been St. Louis in rumors. But then this morning he tweeted out something that's sort of like pulled back a little bit, so maybe his source, he found out that his source was floating an agenda or something like that. I mean, thing is, it's like, I mean, we got all excited over the last weekend when it came out, and then Drouin went to Syracuse and scored a couple goals in that first game. And since then, and I made this point yesterday when Kevin was on the show, he didn't score in 3 games. Now, not to say that 4 games in the AHL is determinative of what the value for Drouin is going to be, but if he had lit it up in the AHL, I think everybody would be climbing over people to trade for him. Maybe this is a case of Yzerman wants to get optimum value, and he's not getting it right now because Drouin is playing okay in the AHL, not great.
I think that's fair. Ty, thoughts on Drouin?
I mean, yeah, you look at this player, and I think one of the big things that's delaying this is that Yzerman doesn't want to be made a fool, and I think that's a huge thing. I mean, you look at, I mentioned this yesterday, the Tyler Seguin trade, and how it really reflected poorly on Peter Chiarelli. Ultimately may have cost him his job in Boston. So I think a lot of GMs, they look at a player, even if he struggled at this level, even if he's not what you thought he would be, you look at him, 3rd overall pick, such a high ceiling. You need to make sure you get the absolute most in a return for that. So maybe the Bolts are just kind of hoping that he does come around, and they can start asking for even more pieces in any trade. You've heard the idea of the Blues maybe trading Robbie Fabry for him, a 1-for-1 swap. Maybe the Bolts want more. Maybe the Bolts want to see if they can throw in a bad contract and
Yeah,
throw in
that's
Shattenkirk
possible.
from the other side too, and even it out.
I could see Coburn going towards St. Louis and Shattenkirk coming back as well. In
See,
this deal, like I could see that. I could see that being as something that works for both teams moving forward. I think you're dead on. I think St. Louis is the one team that could get this done quickly. I don't think there's any other team that could. Like I think there's other teams in there that are definitely interested, but
right.
if this does get done fast, it is St. Louis.
I mean, there's a level of desperation there, Act,
Yeah.
because I mean, St. Louis is having trouble scoring, and Jaden Schwartz is still out, and they're not getting the production out of anybody on that roster other than Tarasenko that they expected. But and we talked about Fabry earlier in the week. He's a good young player. He's talented. He's not a top 3 pick, and I mean, at some point, being a pick in the top 5 doesn't mean loses its meaning. When a player, you determine what a player is. But right now, he's 2 years into his career. So I think Fabry was in the same draft. If not, it was a year later.
Yeah.
But he was a pick lower in the first round, and this was a guy who was a lottery pick, a top 5 pick. And those guys have more value than just one of your run-of-the-mill first-rounders. So that has to be the mentality that Yzerman is looking for. He's looking to get somebody who potentially could be an impact player down the road. And I don't perceive Fabry as being an impact player. I think he's going to be a good one, but that's what he's locked into.
I agree with you. I don't think either side is interested in giving Fabry in this deal, actually. And talking to St. Louis, they're not interested in that either.
Okay.
It makes sense. I mean that this is more along the lines of two teams who both feel as if they are contenders now. They both, the St. Louis Blues think that they should be winning a cup now, and the Lightning went to the Cup Finals last year, so they have every reason to believe they should be there again.
Right.
The Lightning are a little bit less desperate because they went to a Cup Final, because they are younger, they have a little bit longer window, but the Blues have been, in the same spot for a while now, looking like, the best team in the world during the regular season many years, and then not fulfilling the playoffs. So the Blues have a lot more to lose here, in some ways. But I think that and that what's interesting about the Jonathan Drouin thing to me is that it doesn't exactly. Yeah, I mean he's a scorer. But how good is he really? We just don't know. And if you bring Jonathan Drouin into St. Louis, is that going to suddenly going to fix the Blues scoring woes? I don't think that Jonathan Drouin is going to do that. I mean, I think he's got a long way to go before he's really an NHL player still.
Well, that's why I find it tough to believe that this deal is going to get made before the deadline, because the perceived value of Drouin on the part of Yzerman and what teams are willing to give up for him now before the deadline, especially playoff teams that are looking to hold on to every one of their pieces, it doesn't equate. Whereas in the off season, if you trade a defenseman, you trade prospects, it's easier to move pieces around the board. So that's why I think, unless it's a perfect scenario where he gets, if there's another Seth Jones out there, if Edmonton offers Nail Yakupov, a top pick, or Columbus offers Ryan Murray, unless it's like that type of player who has a lot of potential going forward, I think this happens in the off season. But I know that Drouin wants it to happen, and I think.
Well, yeah, but that doesn't matter,
that doesn't matter, yeah.
And it doesn't matter that Alan Walsh wants it to happen either. This is what this is going to happen when it's going to happen, and I think Alan Walsh did really mess things up in a way here by going public with it. To be honest, I think that it didn't help him. Put it that way. It's not, maybe it didn't hurt him, but it didn't get any help. What he does that for, obviously, is to get other teams aware of this, and as if other teams weren't aware, which I know is not the case, because I know. How long have I been talking about Jonathan Drouin being tradable? For over a year. Because I've been hearing for over a year from teams that he was available. Teams that you wouldn't even expect, the teams that had no interest in them at all, knew that he was available for over a year. So this is not something that suddenly, Alan Walsh saying this to everybody now knows Drouin's available. This has been the case that we knew that he wasn't available, that he was available, and that he could pick him up.
Now, the other two teams that were mentioned were Anaheim and Nashville, and we've heard Anaheim before. And the thing is, it's funny because we were talking about Bolesky before. You want exhibits A and B of why Anaheim is struggling this year. One reason is Bolesky. The other reason is Kyle Palmieri, who's playing very well for New Jersey. They gave up on they got draft picks for Palmieri in a trade. They let Bolesky walk as a UFA. So basically, they got nothing. Those guys left that roster. They got nothing that can help them this year in return, and they filled those spots with guys like Chris Stewart and Mike Santorelli. That's the reason why Anaheim.
Who is saying Nashville, by the way? That's not the case.
Well, I believe Renaud Lavoie was saying it in the report. He mentioned Nashville as a possibility.
Yeah, no, I mean the teams Anaheim for sure is definitely involved in this. The Rangers are involved in this for sure.
Yeah, Larry Brooks has been talking about that.
And they are, and the Rangers, they like to get involved in this. Edmonton's involved in this. Buffalo's called about this. Nashville, no, definitely not Nashville.
Minnesota has been.
Minnesota, not anymore. I was told that pretty frankly they weren't involved. But
I know Toronto had scouts at the Syracuse game last week, and pretty much Lou Lamoriello came out this week and said, we're open for business. So.
Yeah, but I was told that they're out of this one. I think they're looking at other things, and I'm not saying they didn't give him a look because he's right there. But the surprise team that no one's talking about is Winnipeg. The Winnipeg could be involved in this one. Shoot, did I freeze?
Yeah, but we can hear you. So.
Okay, yeah. So Winnipeg's this is not a good look for me. Winnipeg is one of these teams. Let me see if I can get myself back.
Well, who does Winnipeg move? Do they move Jacob Trouba with the belief they can't re-sign him?
Yeah, no, not with Trouba for sure.
They can re-sign him because he's an RFA, but the thing is that now you're it all depends on the Byfuglien situation. I think everybody is leaning towards Byfuglien potentially being a trade deadline guy, not being re-signed. Myers is under contract. Enstrom is under contract. They're probably going to have to pay Trouba, big money. Now, the thing is, what does big money mean? Well, if you look at the contracts that were signed for guys like Clefbaum, Larson, we're talking, and this is based on somebody who didn't do a lot in the NHL before they signed the big contracts. They got over $4 million. Trouba has actually done something, so he's probably going to be looking for $5 million.
I'm amazed that Jacob Trouba's name keeps coming up at all. Like, you're right, Ty. I mean, people are saying Jacob Trouba. Jacob Trouba, if you talk to Cheveldaev, he will flat out tell you that he looks at him like Winnipeg's Drew Doughty. Like he's like this would be as hard as getting Drew Doughty out. I just think that you can argue whether or not Trouba's living up to that right now, but that's how they see him. So I just think that he's like Hamonic for Trouba made no sense. It's like you just have to replace Doughty because even though he's not Doughty yet, that's how he's being viewed. So you have to put in your head that that's what they're thinking.
I think some people are thinking this scenario is maybe playing out like the whole Boston thing with Dougie Hamilton. I mean, if Trouba wants really big money that Winnipeg doesn't think that he's deserving of, but I mean, if Cheveldaev is a fan of him, then I think that it's more likely they let Byfuglien go or they trade.
Well,
Byfuglien.
That's why Byfuglien and Ladd aren't signed because of Jacob Trouba. I mean, that's the whole point of it. That's why Byfuglien will probably be traded at the deadline, and that's why Ladd could be gone as well.
And Scheifele. I think Scheifele's up as an RFA too.
Yeah, Scheifele though I think they would give another shot with. I think, and he's an RFA, right? So they could hold on to him a little bit longer.
Give him a bridge deal.
I just don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with Jonathan Drouin, but I don't think it has to happen necessarily fast. And Montreal also does want to get involved in it. Montreal can't right now, but Montreal could. All right, so Jim just got a text that someone else said the Predators are in on Jonathan Drouin as well, huh?
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is that they've been having some trouble recently. They made the Johansson deal. Johansson, I think, scored 2 goals last night, but they still lost to Winnipeg in overtime. They called up Kevin Fiala, their first-round pick from a couple years ago. The comments from David Poile were indicative of somebody he didn't want to call up Fiala. He wanted to keep him down in Milwaukee and let him play down there and mature. Now that could simply be they haven't been scoring lately and they needed an infusion of a little offense. It could be a showcase. I mean, it could be the fact that if there is something to Drouin, that Fiala would be part of it. And Fiala is a very good, very talented 19-year-old prospect. So, I mean, honestly, right now, I think Nashville is not in a desperate situation, but in a situation where I think they're going for it because they've got.
Let me read you something here, okay? Because this is a text from a source there.
Okay.
About Drouin. This was last week, so when the whole Johansson thing came out, the whole thought was, are they going for Drouin, or are they going for Johansson, And I asked about Drouin, and they said They said they absolutely did not like Jonathan Drouin, that they were thankful in the draft that he didn't fall to them in the draft, that they were worried about having to pick him in the first place. So I mean, there's nothing that Jonathan Drouin has done since the draft that would make you suddenly like him more. I mean,
unless you think you're getting him for a bargain.
But you're not getting him a bargain. I mean, there's no way. I mean, when you know like a guy like Shattenkirk's already out there as a possibility for this trade.
Right.
Drouin's not a bargain, and Yzerman's not going to. Yzerman, if there's a bargain, Yzerman just keeps him.
Well,
no point in
what I'm saying is a bargain. I mean, first of all, the Shattenkirk thing. I mean, we know that the salary situation, Shattenkirk making over $4 million, that would be problematic for Tampa unless they did what you were mentioning, which is trading Colburn in that deal, making it a bigger deal. In the situation with the Preds, if and I'm just speculating here, if the centerpiece of what's going back to Tampa Bay is a guy like Fiala, who there have been some reports that they've soured on him a little bit, and that he's in the AHL, and they thought that he was going to make the team. I mean, heck, Kevin and I and you and Russ talked about that at the beginning of the season, that we thought Fiala would be part of the situation in Nashville, and he ended up getting sent to Milwaukee. It was a surprise. So if they think that they can get better by trading a guy who they may have soured on a bit and get a guy like Drouin who needs a change of scenery, maybe that works out. But I'm speculating.
Yeah, I really don't think so. I think that, I mean, Ty, what is Drouin worth in your opinion? I mean, this is like we've been talking about a lot, this week, and I wanted you to get your opinion on this. I mean, there's a lot of people who don't really know what he's worth.
I mean, you watch him and you see the promise there, and I think in a lot of ways his perceived value has been limited by his usage. You looked at John Cooper. I mean, he kept this guy in a third-line, fourth-line role for almost all of last season. He didn't play in the playoffs at all, really. And then this year, he begins the year on the top six with Stamkos and with Callahan on the right side. They came out flying. They looked like a really good trio. Drouin gets hurt, and he's never put back into that role. He's put back into that role for, I think, maybe 1 or 2 games at the very most. And it was very confusing to me because you were getting production out of Drouin when you gave him minutes. When you didn't give him the minutes, he wasn't producing. And I mean, this is not a player that's a fourth-line player. He's not a third-line player. He's a high-end, high-skill guy. And to get production, you need to put him with guys that can make him better as a 20-year-old. I mean, he's not ready to be the focal point of a fourth line. If you stick him with Brian Boyle and J.T. Brown,
right,
he's not going to have success that he would with Stamkos and Callahan.
Right.
So,
right.
And that's to be said for almost any player, I think. It's just they're different caliber types of talents. And, I always thought that the Lightning, they should have plugged him back in with Stamkos and with Callahan, and just because Callahan has gone completely cold since the Drouin injury. He has, I think, 1 goal in his last 30 games. Or something insane like that. Stamkos prefers to play center. He's been playing the wing a little bit here and there. I mean, that would be the ultimate sort of, everybody wins type of scenario. But the Lightning didn't do it. Drouin is now down in the minors, and he probably won't be back for all we know. So I thought this was mishandling by the Bolts in a lot of different ways, from Cooper to Yzerman. And now you're in this position where you go, all right, well, what is this player? I think you could have had an idea had you left him in this top-line role. But now you're sort of, is he an NHL player, which he definitely is. But the return is not going to be what it could have been, in my opinion.
Yeah. And Ty, don't you think that and I know the situations are different, the players are different, they were drafted in different positions, but doesn't this sound eerily similar to the way Brett Conley was treated and they approached him in Tampa? He was on the outs. They didn't like the way he played defense. They sent him to the AHL. He got injured. There was all these things. They never really got a complete idea of what type of player he was, and then they ended up trading him at a value that I think that it was undervalued based on where he was picked. And if he was developed properly, maybe he could have been a better player. Now he's not playing that great with the Bruins, but this guy when he was drafted was considered a talent.
Yeah, and you're supposed to, I think, naturally, if you are trading a player, you want to build him up. You don't want to break him down.
Right. And
because that hurts the return. And I think the Lightning, I don't think they built up Brett Connolly the way they could have. And I mean, they get 2 second-rounders out of it, and looking back on it now, maybe that's not the worst return. But Drouin, You go from top line to third line, fourth line, healthy scratch minors.
Yeah.
And now you have GMs going, okay, well, what's the deal with this player? Whereas if you watch him in those first 2 weeks of the season when he's on the first line, you're like, wow, this player's coming around. This is a guy that you want to build around.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. And now it's getting to the point where people are starting to say, well, there must be something else with him. There must be a reason. There must be something we don't know about. Why? Because what is there with this player, like you said, Ty? And then that often is the scouts saying, when a player like falls out of favor like this, like Hamilton was traded for what? Why? There had to be more to it. Like whenever something strange like this is going on, that's the feeling around the NHL, that there's more to it. Like this is a guy who won't listen to his coach, or this is a guy who, everything I've heard about Jonathan Drouin is not the case. He's a straight up, solid citizen, and he's a good person and a good player. And he's not like a Ryan Johansson or anything like that. The Ryan Johansson rumors and all that. Even Ryan Johansson isn't Ryan Johansson. But players get reputations quickly, and those reputations are impossible to get rid of. Right now, Drouin's got the reputation of he doesn't play defense. He's got the reputation that he tries to do everything at once. That's the one thing I keep being told. Like when he gets on the ice, and this is true when you watch him play. If you look at him play, he has so many moves in his pocket that he refuses to make simple plays, and I think that's what made Cooper crazy. Like he won't make a simple pass. And and I know it made players on the team crazy too. I talked to players on the team too. So yeah, that was sort of the thing with Drouin. But that seems like something that can be coached. It seems like something that can be coached, and for whatever reason, it's not working with Cooper, who's one of the best communicators in the NHL. So that's another thing people are questioning. This is people don't expect players to have problems with Cooper.
Well, you look at Cooper too. I think when it comes to the Stamkos line, he always wants a guy who has a good three-zone game with Stamkos. Whether that's right now, it's Andre Palat, but before that, it was Alex Killorn, it's Callahan, it's Nemestikov, who's actually an underrated sort of winger, in my opinion, in terms of how he plays and his commitment to all three zones. So that's another guy that I think is, Cooper likes those guys to play a three-zone game, especially if you're playing with Stamkos. So maybe that infuriated him with Drew and they didn't get that, but I still think he pulled the plug a little too soon with that.
Yeah, it speaks to a level of distrust in terms of offensive players, and I know that in watching Cooper when he coached in the American Hockey League and won a Calder Cup, and what he's done in Tampa, he's a very structured guy, and he wants his team, as you say, to play in the defensive zone and to make smart plays in the neutral zone. And guys like Stamkos and by extension guys like Drouin, they're scorers. They want to open up the throttle wide and fly. And he's, like most coaches, they try to limit the damage that those players can create on the other side. But most coaches are interested in preventing goals from being scored instead of scoring goals.
I just think you have to tread very lightly with this whole situation, because you look at this last year, you had the closest thing you could to having a modern day, and I say modern day, I mean this was only a decade ago, but you had the closest thing in your pipeline to having LeCavalier, St. Louis, and Richards in Stamkos, Johnson, and Drouin. So, and now you might lose 2 out of those 3 guys. So I think Yzerman has to, and that's what's taken this whole process an incredibly long time, is that he has to make sure he's getting a return that makes sense for the Bolts today, tomorrow, and 5 years from now. Because Drouin, 20 years old, could have spent 20 years in Tampa Bay. So you got to make sure you're not getting bit pieces back, and I think that's why they're going to weigh their options. And plus, they're in control. Drouin has no rights basic's under team control, and what are they going to do? Alan Walsh is going to get mad. Alan Walsh is going to be grumpy no matter what you do. So may as well deal with it.
Yes, indeed. No, I mean we'll see how this plays out, but I really don't think Nashville's involved. I'll throw that out there just from a text I was just texting back and forth with somebody. I want to talk about Holtby for a second, okay? Holtby, who's killing it also in the original 6 game that I'm playing as the Toronto Maple Leafs goaltender, doing really well there too. But he has not lost a game since November 10th in regulation. He is 20-0-2 in that period of time. Yeah. That's pretty unbelievable. I mean, that's just think about that. That's a staggering number. I mean, Holtby is making a big case right now. I mean, I think he's definitely pushed himself as at least the backup for Team Canada. Then we're talking about the World Cup of Hockey. Holtby's got that spot now. We always wondered who that was going to be in the beginning of the year. We questioned that.
Yeah.
But he's beyond that. He's a phenom right now.
If it wasn't for Ovechkin being his teammate, I think because they may neutralize each other for like votes for the Hart because he's definitely going to be in the top 3 for the Vezina, but in terms of Hart, because Price won it last year, and Holtby's having pretty close to the same type of year that Price had. He rightly should be in the mix for that. But the thing is, and we've said this before, the Capitals are making the playoffs. We pretty much accepted that at the beginning of the season. The regular season, what they're doing right now, I think it's 7 or 8 losses, is extremely impressive. They got a great team. They made some nice ads with Oshie and Justin Williams. It's all meaningless if they lose in the first round or even the second round of the playoffs. The season for them begins in mid-April, and that's why I think McClellan, their GM, even though this team doesn't have many holes, I think, especially on defense, I think they need to add one more body. He's got to be able to go out there and maybe make one more addition because you cannot leave anything to chance with that team. They have an opportunity this year with a weakened Rangers, with a weakened Bruins, with the East wide open, that they could run the table and get to the Stanley Cup final. They need to be able to, I think, add a piece or two.
What do you think they need, though? I mean, they seem like a team that has everything right now, and I would be really afraid if I was them to add anything. I mean, they are literally because
I'm not talking about a big piece. I'm just talking about their defense right now. I mean, Carlson, Alzner, and Orlov and Niskanen is pretty good top 4. Orpik is supposed to come back, but they're talking about your 6th defenseman being a guy like Nate Schmidt or Michael Latta.
Yeah.
I mean, they could use a veteran guy, because last year they picked up Tim Gleason at the deadline.
Yeah.
Not saying a guy like that, but a veteran guy. If they get a veteran guy on the blue line, I think that helps them out immensely.
There always needs to be like a Tim Gleason or a Barrett Jackman out there somewhere that you can pick up, like some guy like that. They're just going to come in there and just play countless minutes for you. The one big name is that, of course, has been Dustin Byfuglien, that's been mentioned with the Capitals. I really think that I don't see Barry Trotz letting that happen because it's just, as everyone has this feeling that Dustin Byfuglien's a problem in the locker room, and he's not. He's a great locker room guy, and he's beloved by his teammates. He's completely, he's not a problem, but he's still a big character to enter into that locker room.
Stylistically, he's a problem because he's more of a rover than a defenseman, and we're talking about Barry Trotz with a very strapped-down defensive system. Plus, they can't make that move unless Orpik is on long-term injury, and from everything that has been reported out there, he's going to be coming back.
Right.
So, they don't have the cap room. That's why I'm saying a veteran guy who's making, a couple $1 million a year might be a guy that they can add, but not a big piece, not somebody like Byfuglien.
Yeah, although Byfuglien did also just score in the original 6 game that we just played in overtime to give Toronto the 2-1 win over the Boston Bruins, knocking the Bruins out. The Bruins have been very good in the original 6 league, by the way. So they are. We know if the
Leafs are beating the Bruins, that art does not imitate life.
Well, no, what imitates life is the Blackhawks sucking, because the Blackhawks always sucked in the original 6 era. And for the most part, the Blackhawks were the worst team in hockey. They were always the one team, and they are 1-5. And I actually contacted Eddie Olczyk to see if we can make a goalie change, because Crawford is just getting shelled. He's got Crawford as a goalie.
Until Bobby Hull and Stan Mikita, you were probably right. So until the 60s.
Right, until the 60s. But early on, man, I remember my dad telling me about original 6 stuff and how the Blackhawks were the whipping boy of the NHL. Like, they were the team that just could not get anything going. And of course they had their era. They had their time too. But we all remember how long it was for the Hawks to win a Stanley Cup at home last year when we covered that series. Remember, it was a long time ago. So for an original 6 team. Yeah, that for original 16, that's a lot. But I'm going to bring up at the end of this, I'm going to show you the Patrice Bergeron Jamie Benn fight from today in the original 6. Patrice Bergeron, remember, is on the Bruins. On the Canadiens. On the Canadiens, fighting Jamie Benn on the Bruins. While Brendan
every second of that.
I know. Pierre Maguire just was screwing with people, I'm telling you, when he drafted this team, because he drafted, Marchand, Bergeron, Boychuk. He drafted a lot of Bruins onto the Montreal Canadiens team, and that was just But the funny thing is, Gallagher, is a Bruin, so that would have been more fun. Gallagher and Giroux were watching the fight from the sideline as it was going on, so it was a fun moment. So I have the video of that real quick. I'll show you. It's the first fight we've had in the original six thing. So
next thing you know, the Sedins will be on the Bruins.
You know what's funny is that only one Sedin was drafted, and so I'm so used to putting a D Sedin in front of it, and I just have to put a Sedin when I'm writing out these things, so because I'm actually tracking all these.
Arguably, I think it's the lesser of the Sedin, because I think it was not Henrik that was drafted, it was Daniel, and Henrik is the center.
Yeah, it's Daniel that was drafted.
Yeah.
But nothing's able to stop the awesome line that is Kopitar, Tarasenko, and Parise. That line is just ridiculous, and that they're just tearing up the NHL. Anyway, back to that later. I'm really having fun with it. I'm playing out the games today and tomorrow. So if you go onto my feed, you'll see the Twitch live. We're going to get to the playoffs by tomorrow. So it's just a lot of fun, and then we'll get to that for sure. So and right now the Red Wings are 5-1. They're the top team in the league.
Going back to the Capitals, what we were talking about. They already made their addition up front. Mike Richards, I think. This is the guy that. He can slot in third, fourth line. He can do a fill-in on a first or second line for a game or two. He's not the long-term answer, of course, but you have your forward depth now, and now it becomes addressing that sixth defenseman if you think you have to, right. And more importantly, finding nights to get Braden Holtby a rest. I know he's been incredible. I know he's probably on pace to break the record for single-season wins by a goaltender.
Yeah,
but. Like we've talked about countless times, you do not win a Stanley Cup with your goaltender playing almost every game. It's impossible to play 90 games, whatever it would be in a season. It just doesn't happen.
The funny thing is, Grubauer is not a terrible goaltender, and in front of a Barry Trotz structured defense, you would think that they would play him. I'm pretty sure that last year Holtby played 70 games or very close to it. Yeah. And he wasn't fatigued in the playoffs. He played wonderfully against the Islanders and then against the Rangers. But, if they want to make a deep run and get to the finals, I think in the second half when, the lead in the division is not in question and the lead in the conference is not in question, you take your foot off the pedal a little bit and you give Holtby a little bit of a rest. But on Richards quickly, I think they signed him this early to find out whether he can be what you're saying, Ty, whether he can be that third, fourth line guy who can be in the mix. I think they're keeping their options open because, if he can't keep up, Russ has said his speed has dropped off significantly. And if that's the case, then they may, that could be a contract that's vacated before the trade deadline and open up cap space to get somebody else.
Yeah. I would, his speed has definitely gone down. He can't play center anymore. He's definitely a winger.
Yeah.
I would argue last year that you did see a little bit of fatigue by the end of the Rangers series. Some of the goals that Holtby was giving up were not goals that he gives up in March and April. So I think the fatigue issue will be the biggest thing with this team because you look at that division. Pittsburgh's playing better of late, but they're not what they should be. The Rangers, they're inconsistent as all heck, as they'll tell you. The Islanders, their defense is battered right now. You really wonder how long that can hold up if Boychuk and Leddy and some of these other guys and Hamonic, some of these other guys remain out of the lineup. That's going to really expose, I think, a lot of the problems that the Islanders may have because a guy like Ryan Pulock isn't necessarily ready for the big NHL minutes. He's down in Bridgeport still. So that division is wide open. It's for the Caps to take. So you have to play it carefully here, and I don't think it'd be best to sit Holtby once you get a huge lead because then if your goaltender's only playing 5 or 6 games in the month of March and April, he could get out of rhythm for the playoffs. So this is a weird test, I think, for the Capitals right now. I don't think they're necessarily used to this. They're used to being an elite team, but battling the Rangers and the Penguins to be an elite team. So to be this elite team by such a wide margin here, I think that's something that they're not necessarily used to just yet.
No, you're right. This is a really weird spot, and it's a weird spot for for Barry Trotz to be in as well. Like, from his experiences throughout these, so how they're going to handle this is going to be unique. I think they're going to have. I'm of the mindset that you have to just keep doing what you're doing if it's working, and I hate when teams get out of rhythm going into the playoffs, because especially when you're a team that so much is depending on the playoffs. Like this is when you're a team that has had so many terrible playoffs, and now you're going in and you're just going to let yourself. I mean, they just got to go in full. They just got to keep doing what they're doing. I mean, play, hope be 2 out of every 3 games, just like that. Something along those lines. Don't, rest them on back-to-back nights. That's fine. Rest them on back-to-backs, but don't go, don't go away from them too far. Don't, go resting. I mean, you guys. I don't know. You guys wouldn't remember this, but when I was a kid, the Flyers had a couple of seasons where they were dominant and got killed in the playoffs early on. And after one of those seasons. One was against the Rangers, which is talking to Tom Laidlaw was involved in this game actually. When it was first place 16 and the Rangers beat the Flyers, finishing 16th place in a best of 5 series. And I was at the game 5 of that. Still one of my least favorite memories of all time.
Was that Van Beesbrook for the Rangers?
Oh yes.
Yeah. That
was the famous save that I actually talked to John Van Beesbrook about a couple years ago at a Stanley Cup event. How he destroyed my life with a save that I was behind the net like 20 feet up, and I could see there was no way he could see the shot at all. And I forget who took the shot from the point, but some Flyer took a shot from the point, with their goalie out trying to tie it, and he was totally screened, and he was leaning the other way, and I don't know why he puts his glove up like this and catches it, because he's not even looking at the puck, and he catches it, and the game ends. And I asked him about this at a dinner table. During the Carolina Edmonton series, actually, it was during that series, and I'm like, I finally have you alone. I'm going to talk to you about this play that I watched as a kid. I want to know. I've never heard you talk about it, And he was like, you know what? It's one of my favorite saves of all time, and no one has ever mentioned it to me. I'm like, well, there you go. I saw it. He's like, I did not see the shot. I saw the wind up back like this, he said, and that was it. And I threw my glove up like this, and I caught it. Anyway. The year after that, that's a long rat hole to go down, but I always get emotional about that. The year after that, the Flyers were cruising. They were flying along at no one's going to stop them type things, and they were like the Capitals were now. But it was the same kind of situation where they had lost in the playoffs a couple of years, and this team had to win the playoffs. So they started resting players and making them go on vacation. Do you remember this, Mike? I don't know if it got any play in Canada or not, but they actually sent Bobby Clark to Bermuda for a week in the middle of the season.
Oh, jeez.
All right, and
was this like during Pat Quinn when in the late 70s?
Yep. Actually, I'm confusing two things. Right, time-wise, I'm messed up. The Bobby Clark thing was in the late 70s. There were a couple other players, but let's just go back to Bobby Clark for a second. It was the same situation. They sent Clark. He was getting older. No, this was in the 80s. I'm right. Never mind. Okay. I'm right. This is Clark played until like the mid 80s. So this is the mid 80s, and he is so they send him away, and then they send Bill Barber or Bernie Parent, and they sent these players away in the middle of the season because they were older, and they said, we need to give you guys a break, and it totally screwed the Flyers up. Like these players, Clark, I can just see, having known Bobby Clark now as a person, how he must have reacted to being told this was going to happen. Like, I can't, it was just had to be. I mean, this is a guy who gets so angry at anything that's said to him. I'm sure.
Being sent to Bermuda would be like Napoleon being sent to Elba or
this is whoever had to deliver the news to Clark that you're not going to play for the next week because you're going to Bermuda. That's the part that is something that I would have quit before I would have done. Like I could not have been the person who did that. But what it was an example of was a team that was desperately trying to, like, we want to be fresh for the playoffs. We want to be ready. We want to have everybody going. We don't care if we finish in first, second, or third. We're going to make the playoffs. We're fine. And it just didn't work, and it never works.
Well, that's why, like, I mean, and you can say this, and it may not happen, but that's why it would be beneficial in a way for the Capitals to have a nice long losing streak now, rather than like finish with like the second best record next to the 78 Canadians or 70, whatever that team that had 8 losses, and then go in the playoffs and face, a team, a wild card team who they're expected to beat in 4 straight. and then they have a tough time. I mean, you need to have a little bit of a struggle, and that this year they really haven't. Everything has gone right. Ovechkin's playing great. Holtby is a Hart possibly, or Vezina possibly a Hart candidate. They're getting great play out of Kuznetsov. I mean, everything is working for them. You almost need a little bit of adversity, almost like that one year with the Bruins, Ty, when they had that long losing streak, and then they came back, and that was the year they won the cup, right?
They sort of fell apart in March. I believe it was late February, early March, where they just couldn't find their footing. They actually stumbled in the playoffs, I think, with losses in 6 out of the last 10 or something like that. And everyone thought, okay, this team's going to go nowhere, but you do need adversity. I think that's a huge thing because that builds you as a team. You can't cruise from day one through the playoffs and then get to the first round and play a team that's been clawing tooth and nail since the middle of March and think that you're going to be such a dominant favorite. And I think, the Boston Bruins in 2009 had this problem where 2008, 2009, they rolled through the entire season. They didn't have a single issue of any sort. They finished at 1 point away from the President's Trophy.
Yep.
They cruised through Montreal, who at that point was a battered, broken team. It was the centennial celebration. They just weren't on the same page at all.
Yeah.
And the second round, they faced a Carolina team that had been in playoff mode since January, when they were so far out of it. And they were in playoff mode since the calendar year turned. And the Bruins got their lunch fed to them for 7 games. It was a 7-game series. It was an overtime Game 7. But you watched that series and you thought, man, Carolina has this next gear that the Bruins can't match because they've just been so comfortable for so long. So I think, you need adversity. You need to struggle. You need a losing streak, and you're sort of waiting for that with the Capitals.
Yeah, you are, and I think the good news for the Cats fans is that it'll come. The losing streak will come and here's why. Because this is because the wild card spot is so up for grabs. And there are a lot of teams that are going to be playing very, very hard down the stretch. You're going to be dealing with a lot. I mean, the Caps have the Flyers a bunch. They've hardly played the Flyers yet. They play and the Flyers are going to be battling. There's all these teams are going to be battling down the stretch. By the way, the Flyers play play the Penguins for the first time this season next Thursday. Isn't that insane? I mean, that's like they play 5 times for the rest of they play the rest of the year, but
the Bruins finish their season series in Montreal next week.
Right. It's crazy. So, I mean, this is how the schedule works. But the Caps are going to have their issues because there's going to be a lot of teams gunning, and there's going to be the difference back in the era that I'm talking about was the Flyers were playing a bunch of teams that were terrible, and they were playing, and back then, you kind of knew who was going to make the playoffs, who wasn't going to make the playoffs, or even teams that were going to make the playoffs. When you only had 20-some teams, 16 teams made the playoffs, so everyone made the playoffs. They were still bad teams. The battle now is that there aren't any bad teams, and I really think, especially, I think a lot of teams are getting it together in the East. You can see it.
Well, in the entire league, and what you just said, I think is going to be it's something that's going to be central to what we're going to discuss from now until the deadline. Because if you look at the standings right now, you have 3 teams at the bottom: Buffalo, Columbus, Edmonton, Toronto. Then there's a gap of maybe 3 or 4 points, and then you have all these teams within like 4 or 5 points of each other. Because the Pacific is tight, and because all these teams are pretty close together, you're not going to have a lot of sellers. So a lot of GMs are going to be making a lot of decisions of whether to sell or not. And I think there are teams that are currently in that mix, like Carolina and Winnipeg and Vancouver, a few others that will decide to sell off players. But it's going to be the exact opposite of last year. You had about 1/4 of the league tanking or trying to lose to get in position to draft McDavid or Eichel or any of the top players. This year, even though the draft is good, there are not that many teams that are doing the same thing. So it's going to be very interesting as we get closer to February 29th to see whether these teams are going to position themselves to stay in the race, make moves to stay in the race, or fall back. And if they all stay in it, there are not going to be a lot of sellers at the deadline.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. True. I mean, think about the East right now. There's, 7 or 8 teams separated by, I think, 5 points?
Yeah.
Everyone's in it, with the exception of, I think it's Columbus, Toronto, and Buffalo. Everyone's still in it.
Well, it's 3 points now. When I look at this with the wild card, okay, the wild card right now is Tampa with 43 games played at 48 points. That's the first wild card, right? So they've got 48 points, and then the last the last with 41 games played, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams down. The Flyers with 41 games have 45 points. They've got 3 points less than the Lightning and have played 2 less games. So in actuality, they could pass the Lightning with 2 wins in their wins in games at hand, and yet they are in right now. They're fourth from the bottom in the East. So it's just kind of crazy. I mean, there's so many teams, and there's really it really does come down to you really have to look at games played this time of year, because that's a big marker. Like in the West, the Oilers are not that far out, but when they played 45 games, when you played 45 games, you're versus the Flames, who are a couple points ahead of them but only played 42 games. The Flames could get into the playoffs by winning their games in hand. So yeah, it's completely it's a race. I mean, I believe the Oilers are going to get better. I think the Oilers are not going to be at the bottom again. I believe that, and I want to believe that with all my heart. I do not want to see Austin Matthews in an Oilers jersey.
Well, I wrote about this in my column today because of what I just said about the sort of small gap. If you look at it, Edmonton and Buffalo will be better in the second half because McDavid's coming back.
Yeah.
You got new coaches there. They're coalescing around McClellan and Bilesma, and these young players are. And plus, these teams are not set up. Edmonton, Buffalo are not set up to make trades at the deadline, in a sense they don't have a lot of UFAs. They don't have a lot of guys they want to dump. They have young players that are going to gain experience. Whereas Columbus is going to try to trade players. Toronto is definitely going to. Winnipeg, Vancouver, these teams. So right now, it's set up where Buffalo and Edmonton will climb in the standings as the second half comes around.
Yes, I think that's the case.
I mean, in the divisions, both teams' divisions are pretty blech. So there are points to be had there.
I'll tell you something to look for as far as an interesting move. Okay, the Predators have this kid. What's his name again? The college kid who I forget his name.
Jimmy Vesey.
Right, yeah. Jimmy Vesey, who I mean everybody in the NHL loves. You can't talk to anybody. Mm-hmm. I've talked to so many teams. Columbus tried to get him in the deal. They tried to get him in. They tried to get him in the Suter Johansson deal. Vesey, they just have his rights right now, right, until a certain period of time, and then they'll lose his rights. He'll become a free agent, and a lot of speculation about he's going to end up in Toronto because his dad works there and all that stuff.
And his brother was drafted by Toronto, so there's a lot of family connection.
And then there's a lot of people in Nashville who would tell you that they've been working really hard on getting this relationship going, and that they believe they still have a shot at him, right? They still think he's going to come there.
Sure.
He could be a deadline move. Mm-hmm. I was told that that this could be something that the Predators just because he has a lot of value, a lot of value, and if a team believes they can now, you have to deal with the fact that he can just simply not sign with you, and that's a problem. But if I could see the Maple Leafs moving for him at the deadline.
I completely agree. I think that there's a distinct possibility if that could happen because right now, other than guys like Morgan Riley and a couple other guys, they have players that not that they don't care about trading, but if they trade them, they're players that are now players and they're looking 2 or 3 years down the road. So if they traded Tyler Bozak, who would help potentially Nashville,
who would help the Predators a lot because there's a center, there's another center, they'll give them another. And right now, they've got Johansson, they've got Fisher, but Fisher's hurt a lot, so they're worried about him. If you add Bozak into the situation, I could see Bozak for that. I could see that deal happening. And that like I said, the Predators do really still hold out hope. And I know I'm one of the only people who say that because a lot of people think that there's no way, but I really do believe that the Predators have a shot at him still.
Reports out of Canada are that Jared Tinordi has been traded to the Arizona Coyotes. No word on what's going back to Montreal just yet.
Wow, that's interesting because Tinordi there were high hopes for Tinordi.
Yeah, but they've been sitting him as that seventh defenseman on. They can't send him down to St. John's because he would not clear waivers. And they've sent him down on a conditioning stint or two. So this was a move that basically, they sort of had to make if they didn't think he was going to play. Now, I would be, a team like Arizona who's still in it. They've now, in the span of a couple days, they picked up Connaughton off of waivers from Columbus, and now they've
Yep.
traded for Tinordi. And Tinordi is, I think, 21 or 22 years old.
Yeah.
Big kid. I think he'll work well in the Western Conference. It's just a question of what Arizona gave up for him. If they gave up a good prospect like a Christian Dvorak or something like that, then this is a good move for Montreal.
I'll throw this out there though. They don't need another defenseman like this. Like this is something Arizona is stacked with. Like this is the kind of and to me, it becomes a little curious as to okay, is Arizona looking at Jonathan Drouin, and is Arizona trying to figure out like how are they going to put this? This is an extra player for the Coyotes in my mind.
A move to set up a move.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, it might not. There might be somebody there that just is a real big Tinordi fan, but on the without talking to anybody yet, and just having heard this now, it feels like that. It feels like to me, because when I talked to somebody the other day about Arizona, when they were trying to get in on possibly moving for another defenseman that is a team out east, they said they love their prospects on defense in Arizona. They love the players that they really have built a strong pool there of defensemen, and this is a surprise to a degree that they would pick up Tinordi without perhaps maybe they're thinking of moving somebody else. I've also heard strong rumors in the past few days that Keith Yandle is going to head back there, so that's another one. So there's lots of and not this year, but next year. So Keith Yandle's an issue with the Rangers too. We'll talk about that later, but Keith Yandle's definitely an issue. The Rangers have to. I get a feeling that they're not going to do anything about it. I have a feeling they're just going to let him walk or trade his rights at the draft because they need him if they're going to make a playoff run. Keith Yandle is a really important player for them.
You wonder if Montreal makes a move to get a bottom six forward. I know they're kind of flush with them, but you look at Arizona's roster. I mean, is Steve Downie that guy? Maybe he's the spark plug they want. I don't know. I mean,
yeah.
What I remember from Downie last year is he takes a lot of really bad penalties at really bad times, and as much as he can help your team, he can hurt your team at the same time.
He's such an enigma. He is like a Rafi Torres character. Like basically is the only thing I can say. Like he's not quite as insane as Torres, but Downie has. There are people like I know people who used to be when he was in Tampa when Tampa first moved for him to get him in a trade with the Flyers, I think it was, right? Then they got him through somebody, but he ended up in Tampa.
Yeah.
There were people in Tampa that wanted to sign him long term, and they thought he was a hugely important part of their team moving forward. This was not that long ago, and that Downie was really because Downie has that ability. When you talk to him in person, he's an interesting character because he's hard of hearing, so he's got hearing aids, and he a lot of people have theorized, that people with hearing aids sometimes who often don't hear stuff, they get kind of like paranoid and edgy, and that's a little bit of Downie's character to a degree. They've always said, but there was a point when Downie came into the NHL when he won he was like the best stick handler in the OHL. Like he won some crazy awards that you would never expect a goon to win. So yeah, I mean maybe Downey's a character. Downey's a guy there.
Well, looking at Arizona's organizational depth, they're very top heavy in terms of forwards.
Right.
In terms of prospects, not only the top guys like Dylan Strome, Brendan Perlini, who are both former first-round picks. They have Dvorak. They have Al McGinnis' son Ryan McGinnis. They have Nick Merkley. They have a boatload of good young forward prospects. But if you look at their defense, other than Ekman Larson, who to me is a Norris Trophy candidate, Zdeněk Mihalik is in his 30s. Nick Grossman is a bottom pairing guy. They have some guys like Connor Murphy and Michael Stone who are okay, but they're not really deep in terms of defense. So I think this is a forward for D type of move, and where either the Canadians are getting a forward off of the Coyotes and an NHL roster who can step in right now, or they get a prospect who they think they can call up. And because right now I think Montreal needs reinforcements up front. They have enough defensemen, but they need reinforcements up front.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I wonder, because it's not Domi or Duclair, obviously. But you wonder, who would... I mean, if Montreal's trading Jared Tinordi, I think it's for a player that they think can help them now. Because the pressure's on Montreal to win this window they have right now, I think, especially in this division. I mean, they've lost a lot of ground to the Panthers in a real short span of time. So maybe this is this is the first time we've seen Bergevin in panic mode. I mean, maybe this is that.
It could be a rental player like a Michael Botker, who I know that he's a UFA, he's young, but he probably wasn't going to get re-signed.
They need him to make the playoffs, though. Arizona needs to make the playoffs. They're close enough that they have to keep looking at it that way. Like they're in the playoffs right now, right? I mean.
Yeah, but I mean they may think that they can replace Bodker, that they can't get the payoff for a guy like Bodker. They can't get any more than Tinordi. I mean, Tinordi will help them defensively. I mean, their defense is okay. I mean, Ekman Larson is playing 28 to 30 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes a game.
Craig Cousins is reporting that John Scott is in the deal for Jared Tinordi.
You're kidding.
It's a verified account. I've looked at it. I'm laughing because I can't believe it. But that's what he's saying. He's told that John Scott is involved in the deal.
He can't be the team captain of the Pacific Division if he's traded.
Wow, this is fascinating.
Wow.
He can't be. That eliminates him from being the team. If that is the case,
does he automatically then get put onto the Atlantic Division team?
No, because the Atlantic Division's team captain is
who had more votes?
Yager, isn't it Yager?
Yeah, but Yager doesn't want to go.
Sarah McClellan, the beat reporter for the Coyotes, is saying that John Maloney is watching practice, but he's also on the phone. So they haven't pulled the guy off the ice yet. So.
Well, but he's not even there. Scott's not there. He's in the AHL, right?
That's what I mean.
No, it was a paper transaction. They sent him to the AHL to move him down so they could claim Connaughton, but then they just waived another defenseman yesterday, so he's probably still with the team. He probably didn't get sent down to their AHL team.
I bet you did because they were going to save money. They're not going to keep him up there.
It's a one-way deal. It doesn't matter.
Oh, it doesn't matter. All right.
I think I'm pretty sure it's a one-way deal. This is bizarre.
Well, we're going to keep up on this. We got to get going, but this is really going to be interesting to follow. Just keep track. We'll definitely tweet out stuff and whatever we hear in the near future here about this.
The Habs got themselves their big scorer.
Emphasis on big, not so much on score.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, is John Scott worth anything to the Habs? I guess. I mean,
they got one more game with the Bruins, so. Maybe.
Oh yeah, right. You got to bring him out for that.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right, guys. We'll see. If Craig Cousins is saying it, I would, and it's really his account. Craig's good. Craig's solid. There's no.
Yeah, it's all over the place now. It's just a question of what Arizona's giving up in this deal because I can't imagine it's just John Scott for Jared Tinordi.
What will this mean for the All-Star game?
Yeah.
Boy, how much does it suck to be John Scott? I mean, if he does actually, because he's been, And why would Arizona do this? And Arizona now doesn't have a player going to the All-Star game.
Which means Oliver Ekman-Larsson would be chosen.
But he's the defenseman.
Right. I think John Scott would have been well, no, he's played both forward and defense.
No, they had him as a forward. They brought him in as a forward. Wow.
I'm actually speechless. It's like one of the first times I think I've ever been speechless.
This is a good one. I'm glad we stayed on a little bit longer than normal here. This is kind of crazy. All right, well, we got to go. I do have to pick up my kid at school. But I will sign off. And remember, guys, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you tomorrow, maybe with John Scott news. See you soon.